So that was the first. This, like I said, is just going to be a few slides about the different waves of feminism in the U.S. And again, moving on, now I want to discuss some of the women's rights movements very briefly that are happening in the Middle East. And like I said before, each one of the countries I'm going to cover could be a whole presentation in itself. But I want us to all see what our sisters in other countries are doing and what ideas they have and what they're utilizing and what's going on there, just to give us an idea. Now, women's rights in the Middle East is conditioned by a combination of things like tradition, law, legal rights that women actually have. And women's issues are politicized not just because of their intrinsic importance, but because they intersect with other political issues. And they play a very important role in defining the relationship between religion and politics. So we'll start in Egypt. Now in Egypt, women actually, they have the right to vote, which is good, but few women exercise the right to vote. And actually not that many men do either. They see it as a waste of time in their country, and they don't see once they do vote that it actually has any difference, makes any difference. In Egypt in the year 2000, women gained the right to initiate divorce, but they have to pay their husband money to be able to do this. 50% of women in Egypt are illiterate, and they can't read, they can't write, which of course is another reason why women don't exercise their right to vote too much. Something that's very upsetting is UNICEF and the World Health Organization conducted studies and found that 97% of married Egyptian women have undergone female genital mutilation without their consent. 97%. There's been a campaign, a public awareness campaign to try to stop this and to try to change this. And while it has started a lot of debate about the discussion, at least people are talking about it, we have yet to see if it's really going to change the rates of FGM. I wanted to tell you about two women's organizations in Egypt that are very exciting to me. One is the Center for Egyptian Women's Legal Assistance. This has free of charge literacy classes, legal awareness, legal services, and legal representation. So they're trying to combat the fact that 50% of women can't vote. Also, they're giving women tools of empowerment. If they want to divorce their husband, these people will help them. It's a very ambitious and wonderful project. Something that's very near and dear to my heart, because I love to read and write, is Noor. It's an Arab women's publishing house. And in 1995, they organized the very first ever women's book fair, Arab Women's Book Fair. And they sponsor conferences and lectures. They do literacy classes as well. And they focus on publishing works from Arab women, which I think is wonderful. So Egypt could be a presentation itself, but now we're moving on to Morocco. Okay, in Morocco in 2004, Morocco has a very vibrant women's rights movement, very, very vibrant. And in 2004, they succeeded in changing the personal status code, which amended, it raised the legal age of marriage in Morocco from 15 to 18 years old. It gave women the right to divorce, and it rescinded wife's duty of obedience to her husband, and also imposed strict limitations on polygamy. Something I want to point out about that campaign in 2004, this was done by women just like you and me, just regular everyday women. They saw a need for change, and just regular everyday people undertook to change the law of their country. I mean, it really does give me goosebumps just thinking about it. They changed their world. You know, I think that's just so inspirational and awesome. Also in Morocco, they have a nationwide network of support houses for women domestic abuse survivors. It offers psychological and legal support. They also have a nationwide toll-free number for victims of violence, girls and women. And if you remember what I said before, 1 out of 3 of us will be victims of sexual assault, and 35% of us will experience domestic violence in our lifetime. But around the world, not just in Arab countries, in the US, in Europe, everywhere, there's a culture of shame about it. If it happens, I don't want to talk about it. I'm embarrassed, I want to keep it to myself. But can you imagine how nice it must feel knowing that you're not alone if that's happening to you? That you have in place more than 40 centers that will help you. Maybe it would alleviate a little bit of that problem. So they really do have a very vibrant women's rights community in Morocco. Okay, now we're going to Saudi Arabia, which does not have a vibrant women's rights community, but they're trying very hard. In Saudi Arabia, there's really no way else to put this. There's a gender apartheid going on. 50% of their citizens do not enjoy full human rights. The United Nations, the UNDP, did a very nice report, which was entitled Saudi Arabian Women Perpetual Minors. Because women, even though they're adults, in a lot of circumstances, they're not given the rights that adults are given, and they're treated continually like children. Women's education in Saudi has increased tremendously in the past few decades, but customs and attitudes and traditions haven't kept up with that. Saudi, of course, is the only country in the world where women, they don't vote, they don't drive. They need a man's permission for almost everything, to travel, to get an education, sometimes to seek medical care, even to donate organs after death, which if you can imagine. In Saudi, though, 60% of university students are women, but they only make up 5% of the workplace, which is the lowest proportion in the world. What I want to say about this is that's such a waste. These women are brilliant. You know, they're brilliant, and it makes me sad. Not only do they have to hire people, expats, to come in, and then the money that Saudi pays them gets sent to their countries. Think how much money could be recycled back into Saudi if these highly educated women were working more. Now, in Saudi, women can't vote or run in municipal elections, but they have won seats in professional organizations. For example, in Jeddah, the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce, 2 out of 12 of the board members were elected, and they are women. The National Council of Engineers, 1 out of 10 of their board members is a woman, also elected. So these women are desperately trying. There is a women's rights movement going there, but it has to be hush-hush a lot of the time. But it's starting and it's growing. In Saudi, there's more than 30 charities devoted to helping women. And then there's Ansar al-Mara, which is the only civil society devoted to actually promoting women's rights. This organization is constantly going back and forth between being allowed to function and being not allowed to function. So you can imagine how difficult it is to work in those conditions.
Excuse me? It is closed.
It's closed now?
Yeah.
Don't tell me that.
Yes.
When?
I think last 2 months.
In the past 2 months? What happened?
Nobody sponsored them.
You know, I was reading about that. They wouldn't sponsor them because they were absolutely set on having a mixed workplace. They wouldn't make the women and men be separate. Oh, come on, that was my hopeful part. Everybody pretend you didn't hear that. Okay, also, in Saudi, very sad, very sad. In Saudi Arabia, I'm sure we all heard of a few years ago the Qatif rape case, where the girl and her male companion were raped by 7 Saudi boys, and they were actually received punishment, which the king overturned. But still, living in a society where you will be punished for being raped, imagine the silence that you feel. You don't want to talk about it. There was a survey done by the Al Riyadh newspaper of just Riyadh women, but it found that 75% of women they surveyed reported experiencing domestic or emotional violence at least one point in their life, and 25% of women reported being sexually abused at one point in their life. And like many places in the world, no one wants to talk about it.